Hello and welcome back to awtoolbox.com. My name is Glenn Keller, and in this demonstration we are taking a dive into workflows in the active workspace environment. To begin, I am logged in as just a standard user in the engineering group and role up here, and I need to locate an object to submit to the workflow. Now, we'll go into workflows, we'll go into why you would want to submit to a workflow, but basically, a workflow is a set of tasks. So if we were to draw this out, a workflow is just a set of tasks that need to be achieved in a specific order. And the result of that is typically what's called a release status. Now, all this does is lock it down. So anything you submit into a workflow, the goal is to get it approved, do some work, something like that, and then add a release status to it, which is essentially just a property. It'll represent as a flag in the system. And the goal of that is to just mark it for obsolescence, production, whatever be the case. Workflows are accessed when selecting an object and choosing the Submit to Workflow button. So in this case, I have an assembly. We'll go in here. And that assembly has been imported into my system, and I'm going through and submitting each of the parts to get them reviewed and approved. So I've got this mount stepper here, and I can take a look at this data, I can review it, I can go to its attachments and see information like its geometry, its visualization data, which is the direct model data set over here. And what this is going to help me do is just kind of review it. And when the time comes, I can add additional files, or I can go ahead and submit it into the workflow. Now, there are different types of workflows, and depending on the type of workflow you're submitting to, typically there are rules that say only this one specific type of object, in this case, an item revision, can be submitted to that workflow. If you are submitting a change object, like a problem report, a change request, or a change notice, they will have their own designated workflows that will help you submit those to the change process and perform the steps necessary to get that change implemented. Now, when we're submitting to a workflow process, you right-click on the object and you can choose Submit to Workflow. Now, the Submit to Workflow option in the context menu or the right-click menu has only been available for this version. Now, some administrators will have moved the Submit to Workflow button to the objects in other environments. You can also get to it by coming into the primary toolbar up in the top right, and then going into Manage and Submit to Workflow. And so whichever way that you want to do it, if I'm submitting this into a workflow, it will pop up this Submit to Workflow dialog. So the Submit to Workflow dialog is going to pop up, and depending on your settings in the system, you will get different options, such as the All and Assigned option at the top. What you're really looking for is on this Workflow tab, you have this template field, and you want something in this field. So in my case, because of my permissions in the system, I'm going to be switching to All. You may not have that option. And I'm going to go down, and you can see there's a ton of different templates that are available for different use cases. In this case, I'm getting a requirement sign-off on this object, so I'm going to pick that template. Again, you may not have all those options, but if you don't have any under assigned and you have the ability to select all, then you can see all of the templates. Down below that is the process name and description. So it'll also show you what is added to the workflow. So if this is the only object I'm getting approved or signed off on this process, then that's great. I can choose Add, and I can go through my typical clipboard favorites, recent, or perform a search to add something else to that. I could have also Shift selected or Control selected multiple objects to get that to work. References down below I could add, and really there are two types of attachments here. There's this target attachment and there's this reference attachment. The biggest thing with this is the targets are going to get a release status. So at the end, they'll get that status, it'll be locked down. Whereas any reference material, maybe just additional material or documents that you want carried along with the workflow so that the users have it all right at their fingertips, versus them needing a reference and having to go find it during the process. These objects do not get a release status. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and hit submit. Just note that we'll talk about assignments a little bit more as we go. Assignments are essentially who's going to do what step in the task, and you can see there's this requirement review, and I could go through and pick somebody that's responsible for it. At the moment, I'm not going to do that just to show the default functionality when you submit. So I'm going to submit this to the workflow. And you're going to notice a couple of things. So first of all, I'm going to get this notification, and I'm also going to get this little 1 on my inbox. So this just went out, and because of the state of this workflow, if I click my inbox or go back to the tile on my home page, you'll see that this task is here. So if I submit a workflow, typically the workflow will either go out and other people will have to do it, or if I haven't achieved all the goals yet, it'll come back to me for me to work with. Now, in this case, it is in my inbox, my tasks up at the top. I do also have other inboxes up here, which we'll talk about, essentially tasks that are assigned to your team or tasks that you're tracking that you're not actually doing anything for. On the overview page, it'll tell me what action is there, and then it tells me in this scenario that I need to select a reviewer, and that reviewer has to be a DBA. I can also select additional reviewers. So to start with, I'm going to add the one required reviewer by hitting the little plus button, and I'm going to just pick a DBA of some sort. Now, in this case, I don't want the DBA to be the reviewer. That is a requirement of the workflow, but I'm just going to go ahead and add another reviewer. I'm going to do user 02. So I'm going to come in and say user 02 here and hit add. So now I've got user 02 in there. The minimum participation, this is out of all the reviewers selected, what percent or numeric quantity of those users need to fill out this task in order for the workflow to move forward. So in this case, I could set it to 50%, which would be just one or the other. I'm going to go ahead and move it to numeric and set it to 1. Now, I could also just ignore that and hit require full participation, which means everybody has to apply. So at this point, I've attached and selected reviewers. And I could come down, I can see the preview of the object. I could come up here and go to attachments. My targets are here, so I can expand those down and I could see the objects underneath of them. So I could really review this data if I needed to. I'm going to go ahead and choose complete at this point. And you'll see that the workflow just kind of goes. Now, this workflow is not done. What I did there was essentially assign somebody else to the workflow task to achieve the task. So if I go to team at the moment, you're not going to see anything except for this object, which is not today's object. It's an older workflow. And then if I go to tracking, you'll see that I have my new one here. And it's perform sign-offs. And you can see that the assignee for this is user 01. But if I come into this top area here and choose reviewers, you'll see that user 02 is the one that needs to review. And there's no decision made here. InfoDBA, which is our DBA or admin, could also do that review at this point. But we're waiting for the decision from user 02. If we go to assignments, notice that it shows me user 01 is the assignee at first, InfoDBA and user 02. Those are all the people that have been assigned to the task. The workflow tab is going to show me all the tasks. It's going to show me all of the comments and additional properties, and it'll show me the state of the task. So the requirement review was started. I got the first step in that. So if you're looking at this output here, I can drag these kind of out, give myself a little bit more room, and hit this little black arrow here. And if I do that, you'll see that the requirement review is really made up of 2 tasks. I just achieved the first task by assigning somebody to it, and that's why it went over to the other task. And then I see that user 02, it's still waiting for them to complete. So in here, any upcoming tasks will be displayed, but at this point, user 02 needs to achieve the goal. So I'm going to go ahead and log out and log in as user 02 so that we can finish this workflow. Alrighty, so I'm in here. I'm going to go to my inbox as user 02. You can see I've got a few tasks waiting for me in here. And this one is the one from today. So in this workflow, I can see that it is sitting at that spot. It has been assigned to me. And I can come in and review my attachments. I can see the data. I could open it and work with it. I can also come into the overview and I could provide a comment. This is my comment. And then either reject or approve it. In this case, I'm just going to approve it. And it disappears. So at that point, even if I went back to user 01, the workflow's done. So I do need to just find that object that I submitted to it and see what the state of that object is. Even if I go to tracking or all, you're not going to be able to find that object. So in here, I'm going to come down and log back in as that user 01 just so I can find that object. Remember that was the mount in the 090 search. So I'll log back in. I'll repeat the search 090, and I could have done this as the user 02. And then you can see the mount NEMA 23 is here. Now, a couple of things that have been added to this is we now have a couple of release statuses. And if you scroll to the right on this object, the perform sign-offs is right here. So this is the status, and now when I select it, I will not have permissions to edit the object because that sign-off is applied. I can go to the workflow tab on the object and see that the workflow was completed or all green. And I know based on that and history information what has happened to this data. So this has been an introduction to submitting to a workflow, an object that needs to get released. Stay tuned for more information on what happens when we have a reject, how other types of tasks interact with us as we're going through the workflow, and much, much more.